Welcome to Sermon on the Mount. I'm Jeremy Bacon, and the purpose of this channel is to unpack little snippets of the Sermon on the Mount to help you hear what Jesus is saying to you. We're still fairly early on in this. We're just on the line to where we're about to start talking about the actual text of the sermon. But we can't jump in too fast because Jesus begins this sermon with one of the most famous introductions of all time. The Beatitudes are so rich that sometimes they get an entire book just by themselves. The more I think about the Beatitudes, the more they remind me of a podcast I heard about how to appreciate a work of art. The first tip for appreciating a work of art, like say a painting, is to look at it from all different angles. For instance, get right up close. See what the artist did with the brush strokes. And then you can look at different specific parts of the painting and kind of see what's going on in this part. And look over here and see what's going on in this part. Then after looking at it up close, step back and look at the whole thing. But even then, you can look at it from different angles. And it may look one way straight on, but you may see it completely differently from this side or from this side. The second tip is to take time and just sit with it. See how the painting makes you feel. How does it connect with you? What does it spark in you? Now, this way of approaching a work of art is way different than the way you would approach something like a diagram. A diagram is trying to present you with information. You can analyze it to try to understand what it's saying. Now, academic type people, the folks who write commentaries and theology books, naturally have an analytical bent. They tend to default to approaching the Beatitudes like a diagram. They treat Jesus like he's some kind of Greek philosopher or logician, and they try to systematize the Beatitudes, often trying to find the underlying theme that holds them all together. Usually, the framework they come up with works really well for 2 or 3 of the Beatitudes, but the further they go with it, the more things start to feel forced. I mean, to get the final few Beatitudes into their framework, they really have to bend and twist and squeeze and just try to cram that thing in there until that particular Beatitude has been turned into something that is really different than what it is. I'll give you some examples. It's cute to call the Beatitudes the Beatitudes, but that is just a horrible accident of English. Beatitude comes from the Latin and has nothing to do with the words be or attitudes. But the basic idea here is that Jesus is saying that this is what we should be. This is the character we should strive to develop in ourselves. Well, that makes sense of a bunch of the ones in the middle. Blessed are the merciful, the peacemakers, those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, sure. But then you get to blessed are the pure in heart, and that starts to sound like a pretty big ask. And then you get to the rest, and the rest really seem forced. I mean, mourning or being poor in spirit? That's not really an aspect of your character. That's more something that happens to you. So that doesn't really work. More theologically minded folks try the framework of the great reversal. Those on the bottom end up on top. And that is a major theme of the Gospel of Matthew. Jesus welcomes the rejects, the people you wouldn't expect in the kingdom. Well, that really fits the poor in spirit, those who mourn, the persecuted. That fits them great. But it starts to fall apart in the middle. What's so bad about being pure in heart? Who has anything against peacemakers? Not those guys all keeping us from eating each other. There's no reversal there. The more we let the Beatitudes speak for themselves, the more they resist any effort to categorize or systematize. Because Jesus is not a Greek philosopher. He's a Hebrew rabbi. He's not drawing a diagram, he's painting a picture. Now, saying he's painting a picture, that's a metaphor. But if we say that these Beatitudes are a work of art, I'm not sure there's much metaphor there at all. This is a work of art, and we need to approach it that way. Now, getting up close, looking at the specific parts of the picture, that's what I do a ton in the book. There's a link in the show notes and at the end if you want to get a copy. That is also where we're headed in these videos. But if we step back, we can still look at the whole picture and at least ask, what is the subject of this work of art? What is it about? And that's easy. The subject of this work of art is the kingdom. That's how Matthew frames this whole thing. First Beatitude, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And the last Beatitude ends exactly the same way. Blessed are those who are persecuted on account of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom of heaven is what these Beatitudes are about. So if we step back and look at this painting head on, it is a portrait of the kingdom. Look at the quote-unquote rewards, the second half of each Beatitude, and you could put together a pretty good list of the blessings of the kingdom. Call it the kingdom package, and it looks pretty good. But we can also step to the side and look at this portrait from a different angle. From a different angle, the Beatitudes are a portrait of the values of the kingdom. So the Beatitude folks are not entirely wrong. The blessings do say something about what the kingdom values and what the kingdom doesn't value. Step to the other side, and we see that these Beatitudes are also about people. Blessed are those who. They form a portrait of a citizen of the kingdom. But don't fall back into a diagram mindset. This isn't a checklist that everyone needs to complete. It is a piece of art. Sit with it. Where does it speak to you? A lot of the Beatitudes in the middle may be attractive. It's like, I'd like to be a person like that. But often I'm just not. And Jesus says, in the kingdom, you can be. Or, look at the first few. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who mourn. And you feel, I've been there. Jesus says, then you're exactly who I'm looking for. Because Jesus doesn't just want us to see the kingdom. He wants to invite us into it. He's not just calling us to appreciate this work of art. He's calling us to become a part of it. If you want to stick with us as we dig into the details, hit like, subscribe. There's a link for the book in the show notes and at the end. Until next time, happy travels.